Please hit me one time and make it funky.
I was brought up and taught to have no fear. I was brought up and taught to have no fear. I was brought up and taught to have no fear.
Welcome to the Full Circle Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, David Roberts, along with the OG Dr. Neil Holmes and the oral historian, Andre Taylor. Today, we have a special guest with us, a seasoned educator in the state of Ohio, personal friend of mine, classmate that goes back to middle school. Welcome, Miss Robin McWilliams Cleveland. Robin, how are you doing?
Good evening. Welcome to Full Circle. Hello, Dr. Neil. Hello, Andre. Great to meet you all.
Hey, well, thanks for joining us. I reached out to you a couple of weeks ago because I'm always perusing things, topics for the show. And I came across Ohio House Bill 322 and a sub House Bill 327 and asked you if you had any, strong opinions on it. To sum it up, and you could probably talk about it a little bit better than I can, but just to sum it up for our audience, it's a bill being introduced in Ohio by Republicans, which is no surprise, where they want to limit or possibly eliminate the discussions of race in history, which since this country was founded on racial divisions, I don't see how that's even possible, but they feel like teaching about race in history is divisive. So they want to eliminate that. So just to get us rolling, Robin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have no thought on it because I find it weak. I find it insulting as an educator, and especially as an educator of all Black male school where I am right now. I find it absolutely ridiculous. I don't know where these people live. I don't know what these people do, but that's not what a true educator is about. In education, I know at Central State, we learn to tell the whole story, whether it's pretty or not. We learned that, your pedagogy is your pedagogy, and you do whatever you need to do to make sure that your students are progressing and moving, and they adapt that skill in order to take it to the next level where they are encouraged to do their own research and do their own find out their own depth and meaning to the story. At my own personal thing, I'm not one of those textbook teachers. I never have been, never will. My heart, my mouth will not allow me to conform. I've never been a conventional educator. I never have. Maybe that's what makes me so popular and why people, tend to gravitate to me. I do my best to try to keep it real at all times. There's no way that you can teach any story without telling the whole story. Most of the information is never found in the textbook anyway. Information that needs to be conveyed to my people is often from secondhand stories, grandfathers. It's passed down from uncles and their experience, firsthand accounts, stories around the kitchen table at the holiday, things of that nature. So those stories are from like the ancestral type conditioning, and that's why I learned a lot of things. I still keep in touch with Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson is a relative of my husband's. And so he had, Mr. Johnson taught us from the textbook, but he also taught us different ways and means of different stories. If you go in his basement, he has so many artifacts and so many things from Africa and Senegal and Ghana and all of the places that he has visited, and he has a true collection in his basement, and not just artwork, not just sculptures and crafts. He has also books and things of that nature in his basement. So it's a beautiful thing. I'm going to reach out to him and I'm going to ask him to get in touch with you, see if you'd be interested in having a conversation with him.
Oh,
because
definitely.
He is, of course, I didn't do well in history, but now I appreciate his effort and his teachings and those type of things that you're always in touch by teachers that touch you most. So you always try to mimic and mock those teachers. And our teachers never taught from a book.
And just for people,
not the good ones.
Right, not the great ones. And just for people listening that of course wouldn't know, Mr. Johnson was a world history teacher in our school district, Warrensville Heights. So we both had him in 10th grade. And it's interesting, I think about him when I'm dealing with kids today in school, they always get you with that. How is this going to help me in life? You know how kids do hit you with that when they get a little lazy. I did it too. And I'm sure all of us probably did it said that at one point in high school. And I remember him teaching us about Charles Darwin and basically the survival of the fittest. And that has kind of shaped my mindset moving forward. Whereas when I listen to other people and their opinions, and even when I disagree with them passionately, I'm able to remember what he taught me about Charles Darwin. And I understand that some of these people are just looking out for their own best interests, sometimes to the detriment of others, but I can understand it to some degree. Now, Robert, I'm going to come back to you, but since this is one of those topics, it's education, and everybody here is in education in some degree. OG, Dr. Neil Holmes, why don't we start with you? And I know you never taught from the book. From a book. Dre knows that, but I'm pretty sure I know your opinion. But just for the record, why don't you give us your thoughts on this proposed House bill?
Well, actually, I always taught from several books.
But you chose them, though.
Yeah. Not necessarily a textbook, but always several books. But I want to look at the political background behind this. Steve Bannon, who was the guy who actually developed the strategy to get Donald Trump in the office, and who was one of the leaders of what they call the alt-right movement. That is the right-wing movement that tries to appeal to a broader audience. He has said that this movement against what they call critical race theory is actually going to bring about, they're going to be able to win, that is, the Republicans are going to be able to win 50 seats in Congress. And that issue is going to help them win back the House as well as win back the Senate. So this is what in political science we call a wedge issue. And a wedge issue is an issue that's used to drive a division and split off voters, one group of voters, so that they'll come into your, your area. And so what they're looking at is the Democrats have done quite well over the last couple of elections in the suburbs as well as in the inner cities. And so this question of education, which is always a critical question in the suburbs, and not only among whites, but also among, there's some Asian issues here as well. When you look at Northern Virginia and the attempt to get more Blacks and Latinx people into the AP courses, advanced placement courses, that's also sort of an issue. So this becomes a kind of an issue that is developed in order to bring people who might vote Democrat over to the Republican side. And Virginia has become, in many ways, has moved from a purple state into a blue state, a kind of a Democratic state. And so this is a critical issue around the country in terms of that. So that's the political, in terms of political game. In terms of actual misrepresentation of issues, and Kwame Ture used to always say, the power to define is the power to control. The power to take an issue and define a term on your terms and have people accept it is the power to control, because you're controlling the debate and you're controlling the contours of the discussion. Critical race theory is something that is taught largely in law schools and mostly in grad school. So you're not going to see critical race theory even taught in high school, elementary, in public schools. You might have aspects, you might have some things that have been learned there and kind of passed down, but critical race theory is not taught there. And it is not something that some of these people would have you think is something that is developed to make whites feel bad about being white. In fact, the reason that it's called critical race theory is because it suggests that there's something more than race at issue in determining inequality and other things. And in particular, as legal scholars, they're looking at the role of the state institutions, the courts, and that sort of thing. Now, where I suspect that where Donald Trump picked this term up, because he raised it a year or so ago, I think he picked it up from a group that's called the Federalist Society, a very conservative group of lawyers, judges, law students. And in the law school, in terms of the battle for ideas, one of their most critical or effective opposition is in the critical race theory. So if you can begin to combat that in law school, you have it won. But to bring this out into the public schools is actually to try to control a debate around something that really doesn't exist. And but it has developed a very hot button. It's a hot button issue. It's brought a lot of people out, and for instance, in Northern Virginia, a lot of people who used to have small, boring school board meetings, and now you have them packed to the roof. And so this is an issue that's really one that has to be taken on in a lot of ways.
Now, Dre, let me come to you as the oral historian. And again, for those listening and watching, since us three are in Virginia, and of course, Richmond, Virginia was the Confederate capital. Dre, you are in William and Mary College, and you talked to me about the fact that there's been discussion about a lot of the Confederate symbols around Williamsburg coming down. There's been some in Richmond coming down. And so I looked at the Republican websites, because I like to, hear all sides and see what they're talking about. And what they seem to feel is like this is woke culture, and they're always talking about, oh, here we go with the woke culture again. So that's when I first saw this House Bill 322, that's what I thought this was. I thought this was kind of like a backlash to that. I didn't even think of everything that Dr. Holmes just talked about, but again, that's why he's the OG, right? But were you thinking like I was thinking, like that it was just kind of an attack on the woke culture?
No, what I saw it was what I saw it as was just an attack on humanity. The one thing that you don't want to do is give people the truth. Giving people the truth empowers them. It empowers them to make change. It empowers them to seek out answers for other things. And I think that by knowing certain aspects of history and being able to question those who have dictated and interpret history prior to now makes you raise questions about their ethics, their methodology, and their research. So what I see now, especially over at William and Mary, a lot of the students will ask you questions about, what does this mean in race? Why are people angry about this? Why are people angry about that? And you start to explain these items too, and you get this question, well, how do you know all of that? Well, the obvious reason, I'm Black, and I started researching things that impacted me. And now I understand how people are fearful of critical race theory, not the fact that it exists, but the fact that there's a lot of truth. William and Mary right now, they're building a memorial to the formerly enslaved people that were there. They have as many names as they could possibly have, but I think it's 107 others that they don't have names for. So you see this moment of reckoning going on in the country where people are exposing areas of history that have not been openly explored. And it's empowering people. People like, well, now that I know this and I'm equipped with this knowledge, this is how I'm going to use it going forward. Some people, primarily, the Republicans in Congress and Senate, look at this as, oh boy, here it comes. The gig is up. It's time for us to move on. But the empowered people, it is not just woke people. It's people who now realize there's this new group of people that are like, wow, we didn't know. Then there's the other group who are like Dr. Holmes was like, I've been telling you this for a number of years. It's not new to me,
Exactly.
you know.
No.
So I think now it's the crossroad is, how do we save our tails by diminishing things? And you look at situations like with Nicole Hannah-Jones with UNC Chapel Hill. So she wrote something about 1619. That's fine. And I tell everybody as well, that's the first time that people said, that's up for debate. So do we look at conquistadors in the 1500s coming to Florida who had Black people with them? So it's every state has their version of 1619. South Carolina has 1650. North Carolina has 1645. So you have all these different numbers that are coming out. And I think the fearful thing is, well, they know about 1619. They're going to learn about all these other dates. Here, how are we going to cover this up? And it's not, I don't think that it should be covered up. I think that it should be put out there for people to interpret, because for so long, people never had a lot of this information. You have it now, so you have to use it for what's best for you, and that's interpreting how this country really is.
And Robin, I want to come back to you on that, because Dre makes a good point. Well, he makes several great points. But I know when we were in school, I don't recall much discussion about slavery. Not that that's the only thing that we have in our history, but I don't recall anything about a whole lot about before we even came to America. There's a little bit about the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, so on and so forth. I don't remember Malcolm X ever being mentioned.
Me either.
But has that changed in over 30 years that we were in school? Is it any different now, do you see?
I would hope that it would be, but again, that's on a personalized view. That depends on the individual. We always did February, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King. By being from Cleveland, Garrett Morgan, we always did those, those people who everybody knew. But it was definitely a challenge when we were faced with not them, find somebody else.
Right.
Not them, find somebody else. I had a professor. It's a ton of people out here that you can learn about. Some people that are walking around this campus right now, find out who it is. So that's when you go to your uncles, your fathers, your grandfathers, and all those people who have firsthand accounts, where you can find that type of rich history that's not necessarily in textbook, but is definitely noteworthy and worth learning about.
And since we first started talking about this House Bill 322 and Sub House Bill 327, do we know the status of these bills now? I don't think they've passed.
I don't believe that it will have any legs yet. But of course, there are those individuals who are determined to be right, regardless of what we already know is different. So they have the power and the money and the campaign and this propaganda to do whatever they need to do. So I feel like as an educator, especially in Cleveland with a different, demographic than some of those who are making these bills, they, it depends on whether it gets weight, and it's our job to fight it, to make sure that we make sure that the story is told right, whether it's shown in a bad light or a good light. There are stories where people have done really great things, but they are horrible people. But they've done great things for the culture, for the people, for the community, but they do terrible things behind doors. And some of those doors have been open. Like my grandmama said, whatever you do in the dark will come to light eventually, but that doesn't taint what you've done for people. I don't know.
Exactly. And another thing I thought about when I first read these two bills, or the perspective on these bills, there was a movie I was watching years ago. It was about the A. Philip Randolph, and when he was looking to start the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, right? And so the white men that were in charge of the railroad system, those sleeping cars, they were, somebody suggested, well, why don't we just fire all of them and just hire somebody, hire white men to do this, and the one guy was like, well, bowing and scraping is not my style, and then another person suggested, well, let's get some Asians to do it. They can bow and scrape with the rest of them, with the best of them. And it just made me think that a lot of things that are put out are taught to have us keep conforming, and serve a specific purpose. And so they don't want to get rid of us. They want us to, keep serving that purpose.
Because they
And I
need
thought-
you.
Right, right. And I thought this was, a perfect example about it. Dre, I see you smiling. What's your take on that?
No, go ahead. I'll let you continue. This is
It's like, even to the point when I look at how every day we still have to do the Pledge of Allegiance, in the schools. I'm still in the public school, so we still doing the Pledge of Allegiance. It's still taught that it's a great thing to go off and fight and possibly even die in war. Now if you're 35 or 40 and you'd say, I want to go off and fight and get killed for whatever reason, that's fine. You're old enough to make that decision. But if you're 18 and that's been kind of drummed into you since you were 5 years old, and then you go off at 18, get your legs shot off, and then maybe 10 years later, like Ron Kovic, the Vietnam veteran who came back and said, this was some nonsense, So all of that just kind of ties into the fact that we have, I love education, but it's not perfect. It's an agenda behind it. And it's here to kind of make us conform and give us specific ideas. And whenever that's challenged, there's some people that get their feathers ruffled.
Well, it's uncomfortable. So when
Right.
when certain parties are uncomfortable, they'll do anything to change the narrative to make it so that they shine in a different light. So of course, if your truth is uncomfortable for you, then of course you're not going to try to promote and excel that. You're not going to do that.
another thing that I noticed as well, and Dave, you bring up some good points that I've argued with people about lately. The difference between patriotism and nationalism. The two are not synonymous. Patriotism is me paying my taxes, me voting, and me uplifting my community and country. Nationalism is I pledge allegiance to the flag because it's a symbol that we're pledging an allegiance to. I see people, just recently the 4th of July, how many people have had shirts that look like American flags? And it's, I respect the flag. Well, respecting the flag is understanding the history behind the flag and knowing that what you're doing is not actually respecting the flag. And this part of Virginia that I'm in, I've seen several American flags affixed to the back of these big pickup trucks with big wheels and big exhaust systems, and guys with bent brim hats in it that don't look like me. And the flags are tattered, and it's just like, I stand for the flag. Exactly. And it's these things that are being taught in the school systems that bother me. And as a product of the public school system where I remember when we got our first Black principal in 4th grade, and that was the last time I stood for a flag salute because she said, we're not going to do that here. And it wasn't that she wasn't proud to be from this country. It was that was teaching a method of nationalism. Nationalism is what gets a lot of Americans in trouble when they go overseas, because you have this identity that I'm an American, I have this flag, we have these songs of proud to be an American. However, you don't realize you're in international territory. That does not matter anymore. Your stars and stripes and bars do not extend to this country. And I think that educating young people to believe that supporting the flag is supporting the country is asinine, and I think that they're teaching the wrong methods. You have to do that separation of nationalism and patriotism.
And it's funny when you say that. Jesse Ventura, of all people, he was very supportive of Colin Kaepernick, and so he was talking about. He said when people got upset when Colin Kaepernick knelt, am I saying that correctly? We're all educators, knelt or kneeled. He was saying, well, you don't mandate patriotism. You earn that through what you do. Just like me as a father, I can't, have my 2 kids and go off and do nothing for them and say, hey, you're supposed to love and respect me because I'm your dad. Right. No, I have to kind of earn that by actually taking care of them, and doing something for them. So, when that House bill, when I saw that, that's what, that all tied into it for me, like you're just kind of like being programmed.
But there's,
Dr. Holmes, what do you think?
yeah, well, there's a difference between nationalism and chauvinism.
Mhm.
Nationalism means sort of respect for whatever you consider to be your nation. Chauvinism is the idea that somehow your nation is better than everyone else and has the ability and has the it should be able to dominate everyone else. But I want to go back to this question of the school education in schools, and I want to look at the smaller issue in terms of Ohio than the bigger issue. One of the things that we're seeing in Ohio now is the question in turn within the Republican Party between those people. You have a couple of folks who voted to impeach, Republicans voted to impeach, and also voted to look at what happened in January the 6th. And they're coming under attack by Trump Republicans. And basically the Republican Party today is pretty much Trump Republicans. 56% of Republicans today believe that Trump actually, the election was stolen from him, and another 19% are not sure. They might lean one way or the other. So yeah, a pretty good majority of the Republican Party believes that Donald Trump had the election stolen from him, and so that's part of the thing. Now so it's interesting that when Trump came to Ohio recently, the governor who represents sort of the old school Republican Party wasn't there, and Portman, who's resigning, Senator Portman, who's resigning, wasn't there, and I think Gonzalez, who's coming under attack, wasn't there either, and he's up in I think up in Lorraine in that area.
Medina, Lorraine, up there somewhere.
Yeah, up sort of.
Elyria, something like that.
Yeah, Elyria maybe, Elyria,
Mhm.
Lorraine, in that
Mhm.
section. So so that's part of the internal kind of thing. So you want an issue that's designed to bring, if you don't support this issue, you're really not supporting Republicans, as well as you're really supporting this issue, you're really not supporting white folks. And now for the bigger issue in terms of one group, this chauvinist group trying to oppress other groups, is that you have attempt of what they call race peace. That is, you can oppress people, and as long, people who oppress us want us not only to be oppressed, but they also want us to smile and love them at the same time they're oppressing them.
Mhm.
So race peace is when you oppress people and no one even challenges, even theoretically, the basis for that oppression. And so when people begin to challenge that, both in terms of words, theories, ideas, but also in the street, then they begin to go into motion. And what's interesting is what whites are doing here is who are majority in the country, are doing all the things that they criticized African people for doing. So, for instance, they say that whenever we raise some issues, they say we are taking this victim approach, and they have taken the victim's approach. People are saying bad things about us because we're white. They say that there's a certain kind of council culture that won't let ideas be heard, and here you have ideas being, freely stated, and instead of debating these ideas as ideas versus idea, they want to shut down debate, which is tantamount to book burning. So when you shut down debate and shut down ideas, you're also a book burner, and we know where that always leads. So this question of this is a huge question. It's also the norm. I mean, I should say the norm, but this is part of the process. In political science, there's one brother who has a theory called dominant subordinate theory, and basically what he says is that if you have a dominant group and have a subordinate group, when the subordinate groups begin to successfully challenge the dominant group and maybe begins to make some change in the subordinate group, the dominant group has to come with a new game.
Mhm.
And what this new game plan that these folks have developed is really relying a lot upon what we developed, what we did. They're borrowing from our playbook. They've read our playbook quite well. They've read it. We've forgotten more stuff from our playbook, and they're picking that stuff up and using it fairly effectively.
You know, and it's funny. I thought that when I first saw that bill, you know, I was just like, the only thing I was thinking was, and we've all touched on it, backlash, you know, backlash to Juneteenth, backlash to Trump not winning the election, you know, backlash to he may get, you know, he may end up being prosecuted. Even when Bill Cosby was released, I was thinking, okay, there's probably going to be some more things, you know, that are going to happen as a result of that, because I'm sure that there were people, whether you think he's guilty or not, I don't know. Of course, I wasn't there, but I just knew that this was an icon from our community who was, you know, completely neutralized. So when he was released, I was thinking, okay, maybe there's going to be some more, you know, backlash to this, you know, and we saw some with Felicia Rashad's comments, and then how Howard University, you know, kind of wanted her to walk that back, you know. So I guess, Robin, I would probably come to you and say, obviously you hope that this bill does not pass, but what do you hope to see happen with education in Ohio moving forward?
Well, that's I just hope that if the bill does pass, that there are going to be rebel teachers like myself who's still going to teach what they want to teach. My question is, how are you going to monitor that? I mean, where's the test for that? How are you going to monitor that? Who's going to come in daily to see what I'm teaching as that happens? You know, my administrators are loaded. And like I had a lady that once tell me, you know, shit runs downhill. So, you know, whatever happens at the top, the people that work towards that are not people that are really in the trenches. They don't have time for that. We have kids who are on the verge of suicide, who are not handling pandemic well, who are not handling coming out from pandemic well. Because at my school, they wear suit and ties daily. You know, we wear suits every day. They've been in joggers and sweatpants and tennis shoes every day. Nobody's had on a hard bottom shoe in almost 18, 19 months. Nobody's been dressed and had a haircut in 18, 19 months. Some of the kids that I haven't seen since 20. They've grown 3 inches, gained 40 pounds, these guys are different. They don't look the same. So, and I can only imagine how they feel. A lot of these kids have lost people, have social emotional learning part is going to be so big, and I don't think they're ready for that. I believe that, you know, education is definitely a business. My husband says it all the time. Education is a business. So I just hope that we don't lose the purpose and the whole reason and my calling to this education thing in the first place. I became an educator because I felt like I wasn't taught enough. Yeah, I was smart. Yeah, I did okay, but I wasn't taught what I needed to. I always tell somebody, like, nobody ever told me, just shut up, listen. You just shh, be quiet. You know, sometimes the best response is no response. Those are the things that I learned later here at the great Central State University. You know, I never learned that in high school. And I feel like with these speeding times and this microwave age and how kids want things right here, right now, and there is no process, you know, it's right now. Push a button and it happens. Click a button and it happens. So I just hope that if it does, I don't care if it does or if it doesn't pass, people like me are going to do what we need to do for our kids anyway.
I think that's
hook or crook.
I think that's the best response, that whether it passes or not, you're going to have educators like yourself that really won't care about it. You know.